I'm just going to start off by saying I'm so happy that you're joining us. You're like not just the biggest star, but also the conversation I've really wanted to have for quite a long time. So welcome, David.
Thank you so much, Björn. Thank you.
Okay, so we've known each other for what, a year and a half, something like that. And but we've never really had the conversation, sort of like your origins as a hacker. So I'm really, really interested in hearing it in this conversation and not from like a presentation. Can you maybe talk about it a little bit?
Sure. I actually got an email today from a guy that was attending one of our sales meetings. And he was like, I want to get into hacking and ethical hacking and stuff like that. And I was like, and I wrote just a small answer instead of giving him the broad answer. I just explained to him that hacking for me is a philosophy. It's a way of living. It's a way of thinking. It's not a job. It's not a profession in that way. It's like you become a hacker and the goal is to not let technology control you, but that you should control technology. If you can achieve that, then you're a hacker. But my background is started out, from BBSs, bulletin board systems. Before the internet, a computer could dial into through the phone line another computer and share messages and share files and so on. And I found text files explaining on how to cheat the phone system, so-called phreaking. And I downloaded those files and was like, this sounds really cool. I want to do that because at that time it cost a lot of money to do normal phone calls. It was expensive, specifically long distance phone calls. So I tried these methods on the phone system, and apparently they didn't work because they were written by Americans for the American phone system. And we had a different type of phone system here in Sweden, so it didn't work. And that got me thinking, like, why is this not working? It should work. I followed the manual and it didn't work. So I started to investigate, and that was basically my entry point into controlling technologies. Okay, I have a phone, I have a computer, I have a modem, I have all these things. What can I do with that? Hacking didn't really exist at that time in the same way as we explain hacking. So for me, it was more about learning technology and just, figuring things out. And that later became a job, but more from a sysadmin point of view. Like, okay, so I know these things about computers and people apparently need help because they haven't spent the time learning about these things. So I got a job securing a hosting company because I was pointing out to them that, oh, you have all these vulnerabilities. I can take over your systems, so maybe you should fix that. And they offered me a job, and that led me to this. It sounds cheesy to say it, but I'll say it anyway. It sounds to this amazing journey.
I hear this all the time from well-known programmers that they started off by buying magazines that had like maybe assembly code or basic code, and then they started trying just to copy paste it. This is a little bit before my time, I have to admit. But was it kind of like that? So you're just trying to copy the instructions and then became curious?
It was exactly like that, because knowledge about computer systems and programming and stuff, that was not a commodity. It was very difficult to obtain information about computers. It was so new. So the stuff that you couldn't just go to the library and get a book. You couldn't get this information. So the hunt for cool information that you could do with your computers, like everything from download a game or play different games or programming or just experiencing different operating systems. That was not a commodity. It was not easy to find that information. So the hunt for information was part of the game,
Yeah, it's kind of like the barrier to entry was much higher at the time, yet you and, myself and many other people, they still had this kind of thirst for learning a little bit more. Back in the day when we had 28 or 36K dial-up modems, I was still trying to download game demos. It took hours or days or something, but it was just some curiosity that sort of drove it forward. And the reason why I'm saying this is today, barrier to entry to learning, coding or cybersecurity, it is a very different type of situation. And I wonder, like, do you think it's gonna create more hackers, or is it gonna create, worse hackers because everything is so easy now?
So I think the reason why you wanted to become a hacker is changed, because at that time, it's not like you just noticed that you had this ability, this knowledge that you could tame code and software and programs. Now it's like, oh, I want to go to the university and I want to go study ethical hacking for 3 years because I then want to work with offensive security or whatever it means. So I think we are in one kind of way watering down the term hacker. I do believe that we still need a lot more people doing security controls and everything from penetration testing, security audits, analysts on SOC teams or reverse engineering. We need more people because the demand is there and we have to fulfill the demand. And we know that one person or one team is not strong enough. We need more hands and more brains to do this. But at the same time, IT is one of the few industries where you can have a job and there's no actual, I don't want to call it certification because there is certifications, but if you become a doctor, for example, you want to work as a brain surgeon, you will have to study for X years and then you have to do your practical training, and you're like that's maybe a process of 10, 12 years before you become a full-blown brain surgeon. Now, I don't know anything about brain surgeons, but to become an ethical hacker, you can, in theory, study for 1 or 2 years, and then you can say, I'm an ethical hacker. And for me, I don't want to have that. I want to be able to take pride in that title and bring back hacking as something that's, I shouldn't say easy, but more about difficult to become. Like you can be a really good programmer, a really good auditor. You can become like really talented, but we need to have more controls over the profession ethical hackers, because it's such a serious job, because you're basically saving lives depending on what you're testing or auditing, like society and social systems and medical systems and financial systems and so on. You're basically being a firefighter, so that job should be taken seriously. At the same time, like if you compare it to a doctor or a police officer or something, you're representing something that is not financially driven. You're representing something that's doing good in society. Did that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And if you take this just to software engineering, the fact that we call it software engineering, while it's not like a true engineering discipline, you can learn coding or software development at even high school level, or even before. There's not really any accreditation except just like a CS degree or whatever it's called. But then the standards by which you follow are very different from engineering or what doctors do. They have their playbooks, they have their standards, they have their, all their tests. But if you just take the example of building a bridge, it's a really well-known problem. You have the structural mathematics behind it. But in software, I don't really identify with it being an engineering type of task. I think it's way closer to gardening than engineering, because it's like planting seeds, making them grow, killing off the weeds. And I strongly feel that it's a much better metaphor than engineering. But at the same time, I don't really think that that's really the correct way to approach it. I agree with you that if we're going to make software that delivers the value to the customer, that it's secure-ish from exploitation, then it needs to be held at a much, much higher standard. And I also think that barrier to entry, it's not maybe a great business decision, but I think it's necessary in order for us to actually get to the sort of next level.
I have a very positive view on this. If you compare it with building bridges or being a doctor or creating medicine or whatever thing that we do, we've done that for multiple hundreds of years, right? We have not done IT and specifically software development and cybersecurity for several hundreds of years. We are the first generations who ever touches a keyboard. We also have to be humble about where we are in this timeline. Like, remember the Wright brothers, when the brothers who invented their aircraft, right? They go on this hill and they jump off this hill and they just keep crashing every time because they have figured out the theory behind it, but they haven't really been able to build that airplane. They just know that this should work, but they haven't really found the building technique for an airplane. My comparison is that kind of where we are in the timeline of IT. Like we have the theory, we know what to do, we do it quite well, but we keep crashing every time because the IT landscape, they keep changing. We have, during those years as that I was interested in computers, the default programming language has changed multiple times. Everything from COBOL to assembly to Perl to Python to PHP. Like if you ask anyone to develop a web app for you and you say, can you please do it in PHP? What would you say? What's your opinion about that?
I wouldn't, but I get excited if somebody has a PHP site because I think it's highly likely that you'll find something interesting.
See? So,
Yeah.
but if you go back, maybe not 10 years, the default language to write a website was in PHP. Like everyone was screaming for PHP. Now suddenly you want to have some Node.js framework, yada yada, and that's fine. But imagine, think about that from a educational point of view or from hiring point of view. How do you consume security? If you want to buy security or technology or IT, what should you require? Like, how do you buy a pen test? How do you buy a SOC service? How do you buy vulnerability scanning? What demands can you put on the client if you want to buy security?
Okay, I think this is a great way to segue a little bit. I'm gonna tell you a story. Maybe I've told you this already, but so I joined Syndis in 2020, and I met like these incredibly intelligent people at Syndis. But the thing that I found out really quickly was that the amazing things they were doing technically and the exploits that they were developing didn't really translate well into the value that the company was either perceiving or even actually getting. It was just, we were doing cool stuff, but the customer didn't really understand it. And because you said this piece about how do you buy a pen test, the typical buyer of a pen test, at least in my experience, is not well educated on why they're buying it, how they should structure it, how they should focus it. So it became my job in a way to try to assess sort of like their threat models so that we could get them onto the right type of pen test. I think this is incredibly important. If you don't understand what you're buying or why you're buying it, it doesn't really matter if you buy a pen test from Syndis or from David Jacobi or if it's just from like Little or Aldi, because you don't know what to do with the information. What do you think about that?
So part of my job at Syndis is to create this idea where we bring value, right? Like when you buy a pen test, what are you buying? What's the final product of a penetration test? Is it the information that you have X amount of vulnerabilities in your network? Is that the final product? Is it a piece of paper stating some risks that we found with mitigation plans? Is that the final product? What is the final product that you're actually selling? Because when you define this specific final product for the customer, but also for the person who is executing that job, the actual pen tester, if the final product is not specifically like extremely clear to the buyer and the executor, that's a conflict, because then you might buy something that you think you have a value for. But I want, for example, since we're talking about pen testing, it's like the pen test report that we deliver from our offensive security team at Syndis should be such a good value for the client that it resonates with the security journey that the company does. It resonates with the technical people who's going to make sure that the systems and the infrastructure and the things that was tested is up to date with not just modern security practices, but also that they don't do the same mistakes over and over again. Like the pen test report should not be a dead document after 2 weeks. It should be something that lives, right? It should.
Yeah.
It should be so many things. Like it should be the foundation for development training. It should be the foundation for security investments for the coming next year, maybe. So the value, that final product of a penetration test is something, right? The final product of Aftra. What is the final product? What are they actually buying? Like vulnerability scanning? No, there's more. Vulnerability management? Yeah, that included. External attack surface monitoring? Yes, that included as well. But what is the actual final product that they touch, that they can say, this is what we bought? That's
I
a
think,
very interesting thing to discuss.
I mean, I totally agree. And I actually think that there isn't a final product. So first off is about finding a way to turn cyber risk into business clarity through whatever means. So I think it's really important that the business itself has a way to translate cyber risk, regardless of where it comes from, if it's vulnerability scanning, if it's pen tests, if it's a bug bounty program, if it whatever it is. But you have to translate that into a language where the C-suite or the people that run the company understand it in sort of their language. And I think it's really important to, and this is just me talking, you don't have to agree, is that the actual C-suite with compliance frameworks like NIS2, NIS1, of course, all those things, makes the non-technical executives carry all the risk. If the company gets hacked, they are the ones that actually carry the risk, but they don't own or operate the language. Usually the cybersecurity element of things becomes like an inconvenience that is managed by some IT manager or a CISO, and I'm not putting down the CISOs, but they're not usually like true executives. They are operators in a way, and they have a really important job, of course. The second aspect, or maybe third or fourth, is that the game of cybersecurity from a defender versus offensive is an incredibly unfair game. You know, as a defender, you kind of have to fix everything. You kind of have to know everything. But you as an attacker, you kind of just need one thing. And then there's, of course, escalation. You know, you find a way through the external barrier, and then you have lateral movement when you get into something, all of those things. Okay, and that brings me to the next point, which is that if this is like the status quo, and the bad hackers are the ones that are researching new vulnerabilities at a faster pace than the defenders, it's an unwinnable game. You will never, in this scenario, get to a point where you're ahead of the hackers, ever. So there is no final product. There is no terminal state.
Okay, this is super interesting. So I think there is, but it's the way we talk about things. Why are we calling it attacker and defender? Why are we not calling it controller? Because that's basically what we're doing. We're identifying controls inside your network. Of course, through ethical hacking, but the controls is, can someone become domain admin? Can someone compromise this? Can someone move lateral on the network? Can someone do all these things? That's a control. I completely agree. If we keep calling it attacker and defender, we're losing this game. Because I just need to find whatever type of vulnerabilities and say, haha, you lose. I found this. You didn't. Blah. That's wrong. We are controllers. Like, it's equally important for someone performing a penetration test to document every strength inside the network as well. Oh, you had an EDR on this machine. Oh, there was network segmentation here. Oh, this was, you actually had a very good patch management process. So we couldn't exploit any public vulnerabilities out there. We had to do other stuff. So basically what we found in the pen test maybe was misconfiguration or something. But all of this is technical controls. And we should write the report as a technical control, like documenting the strength and the weaknesses in these controls. If we only document the weaknesses and we're the attackers, so we found stuff in your network, haha, that's the wrong approach to do it, if you ask me. So it's just very unsexy to say that you're a digital inspection person. It's cooler to say that you're an ethical hacker.
Oh man, I'm going to start using this. What do you do? I'm a digital inspection person.
Yeah, it's like, it sounds not super cool, but it's like, oh, what do you do for a living? I hack companies. Yeah, that sounds really cool. That's the future, right? That's Johnny Mnemonic. That's the Matrix, right? But we are actually just a control function. We should be a control function. Like, everyone should say, okay, we're controlling that your investment is up to date, that your configuration is up to date, that your local hardening is working, that your hybrid cloud environment is configured right, and we do it as an inspection. To call it offensive 1337 elite ponage stuff, that doesn't fly anymore. You know, that's not what we should do. That's not the value that we're delivering.
Yeah, this resonates really strongly with me. But I still wonder, if you were asked, despite all the controls, would you still be able to break in if you had the right incentives? What would your answer be? Just in general, any company.
In general, we always find a way in. in general, if that answers your question. But it also has to be documented in a way that's realistic. So this is another opinion I have about pen testing, which is we are given, in most cases, access to the network or an account or VPN access or whatever. We're giving all these things, and we're allowed to roam freely on the network, causing all kind of alarms to pop off. The SOC team hates us, and everyone hates us. And that's not fair game unless you specify the rules in the scoping and in the document. That's what I mean. Like in the final product, if it just says, hey, we became domain admin. Yeah, you did, but you also caused 15,000 alarms for the SOC team to ignore for you to become domain admin.
Yeah,
so
which they would
that's
have,
why I
or
see it
could have
as like a
responded
control. Sorry.
Yeah, which the SOC team could have responded to or something like that. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's why I see it as a control function. We should be allowed to trigger things with the SOC and then move forward because we're controlling the security status. We're controlling this. But I just don't think it's fair. I think I want to change the way to go from defender and attacker, because they feel like they're fighting against each other. We want to work together with the defenders by adding controls or validating the controls that they have put in place.
Yeah, I love that. It's really good. I have seen some of your talks, presentations. Almost all of them are extremely good, or actually all of them probably. But you are really exceptionally strong at demonstrating everyday technology to make the point. And one of the lectures you had was about, for example, this idea of us using like the personal laptops and PCs versus using phones.
Yes. Computers, our normal desktops, even I don't care if you're running Linux or Windows or Mac, but the computers that we use today, they've not really changed in their design for the past 20 years almost. If you look at the computer today, it has hard drive, RAM, graphic card, network card, keyboard, mouse, monitor, yada yada. And you have the underlying operating system, and above the underlying operating system, you have the graphical user interface, and above that you have the application layer with whatever kind of applications that you're using, right? But if you look at modern attacks, it's session hijacking, it's infecting the computer with code, it's living off the land, like getting access to the file system. And so all these things are possible because it exists in the systems. Like most users, maybe not you and me, Björn, but most users, they never use the underlying operating system. They never go to like start, run, CMD, get a black window and start typing commands. That never happens. We always use the web browser for stuff. And the applications that we have are not specifically designed in a secure way to handle this. Like you have databases with passwords, with session tokens, in clear text in your file systems. You have access to PowerShell and Python and other kind of scripting languages, allowing you to perform really technically advanced stuff like encrypting files and moving lateral on the network and getting access to functions inside the computer which a normal user don't need access to. While if you look at the phones, they're sandbox. They're fully application based. You only press the application that you want to use. You never complain that you cannot access the file system on your phone. You never complain about it. You just use your phone on a regular daily basis and you're all super happy chappy about this. So the phones is actually designed and developed in a world where we work with APIs, we work with cloud services and cloud applications. It's designed specifically for that. Also authentication and password management. It uses your phone, your biometrics, all these things to add another security layer. The computers, it's just like meh. It's terrible. It's terrible. If you become local admin on a machine, Linux, Mac, Windows, it's game over. That's a game over scenario. And we have to move away from that because the computers gives us so much functionality that we can use that we don't need. The cyber criminals, they need it. And it's there. We're not preventing them from accessing that. That's my main concern, that we have so much faith in a technology that really hasn't changed in 20 years.
Okay, incredibly interesting. So why do we still need or use those computers? Because I was just trying out OpenCode, for example, and these frameworks where you can do coding with LLM models running somewhere in the world. But it just occurs to me that usually when you're developing something like a small application, you always have to like run something locally. You have to like have a test server and you have to import stuff and download stuff onto your machine. But it occurs to me that you don't necessarily have to do that if you're using these kinds of tools. Essentially you can do application development or even more through something like a browser. So I would just state that we can probably quite easily move away from this model where your personal laptop actually has all of these capabilities.
We have with Chromebooks, for example, just one example, it's extremely limited. Like you don't have access to basically anything, really. That's one way forward. I just think, just play with the idea that you took your phone and you can have an external keyboard, an external monitor, and maybe even a mouse, something. Would that work for you in your daily job? No, I'm not talking about developing and coding and not normal persons.
Actually, I have recently moved to using an iPad with a keyboard, and it works for me 95%.
That is my theory in this. Like, if we could convert most of the users who are not writing advanced software or doing like network administration, or I'm not talking about those users. I'm talking about the normal user who checks their email, browses the website, uses whatever kind of cloud services, financial systems or marketing systems or sales or whatever. They don't need a computer. They do not need it. They need an iPad and a keyboard, and that's it. That's all they need. And we also have very good MDM, mobile device management solutions. So you can also do local hardening on all these mobile devices as well to have them in the same structure as Windows, Microsoft systems with GPOs and Active Directory and yada yada. You can do the same thing with mobile devices. So you can buy them in bulk for your company and have profiles and authentication and password management and storage and access control, VPN access, and whatever you want to do, you can do that through the mobile device management platform. That's the world I want to see, because as a pen tester, that would make my life. Imagine going to a company and the company says, we are 100 employees and we have 100 iPads. What would you do?
Yeah. I mean, I'd be
What
very
would
sad.
I
also think if you are actually doing a pen test, you didn't know this prior. You come in, you do the pen test, you find something on the network. Here's a computer. And then you get access. Damn, it's an iPad. What the hell am I going to do? Not a lot.
No, not a lot. So, of course, nothing is 100% safe, but that would at least eliminate all the known attacks like hacking the certificate authority, doing password sniffing with responder or man-in-the-middle attack. It will just solve so many problems. People storing passwords on their desktop in text files and all these yada yada, all these things would just be eliminated. And maybe some new vulnerabilities would pop up, but still everyone would have to rethink both the hacking part and the defensive part, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Research that I've done lately that I haven't showed you is the post-exploitation. Like if you hack a computer, if you hack one of these desktops, what can you actually do? I demonstrated some of the Mac OS stuff on our Syndis conference, but I've done some more research about, okay, how do I, for example, utilize this access to something more? And I actually just stumbled upon this when I was talking to my wife. I was like, we're talking about different kind of attack methods that I was trying out. I was like, what if I just, as now, I have my headphones here, these Bluetooth headphones. And after I'm done with this meeting, I'll just take them off, put them on the table, or put them in my pocket or whatever. If they're not inside this little box, we have a problem. So what I did was I basically hacked my own computer and was able to activate the microphone on whatever kind of Bluetooth device that was just previously connected to the computer. So if you one time gave access to a Bluetooth device, if that device is nearby, you can activate that connection like this. And that's interesting because I was just doing this for fun. I was like, okay, I put my headphones on a counter in the kitchen, and I was like, just kept talking to my wife and just run this program, and suddenly just activate the microphone. It makes sense. It's just easy. You can just record anything from any Bluetooth device that was ever connected to your computer, as long as that device is close and has power, obviously. I mean, we need more protection on the devices to just activate the web camera or the microphone or whatever. It was too easy. It should be a little bit more difficult than that, you know?
Scary stuff.
I will show you. Next time I'm in Reykjavik, I'll show you.
Yeah, definitely. Because you were talking about like these vulnerabilities, I'm really interested in sort of like threat modeling. And because I said earlier, the game is rigged. It's much harder for the defender, or many more things you have to think about. So, okay, so we've moved to a world where everybody's on like iPads or pads of some kind. You don't have access to the file system. But then, you know, we come into sort of like phishing area. So that's really a hard problem, in my opinion, to solve. Firstly, because it's really easy to trick somebody. If you are measuring the success of a phishing exercise within your company, I think a much stronger KPI is to see how many actually notified somebody that there was a phishing email, rather than saying how many fell for it. Because I'm just saying here, if you have a good enough contact, if you have the right context, you're gonna phish somebody, right? But okay, if you really want to monitor this stuff, then you need to break privacy. So it's really hard.
Okay. Yeah. So my opinion about phishing simulators is that we should just not do it. Period. I can completely agree. What are we actually measuring? We are measuring what? And even if you do, let's say, okay, you measure if someone clicked on a link, okay, and then you come up with this scare tactic saying, oh, but that could have been a 0-day. That could have been blah. It's like, fair enough. That could have been a 0-day. But what about all these other implementation of security that exists in the company? Like, okay, let's say I send a phishing email to you or whoever, and you're like, okay, I capture your username and password, but you have multi-factor authentication. Okay, so that doesn't work really. What about if you click that link and it's like, that could have been a 0-day and I could have compromised your computer. Yeah, but I was running whatever kind of EDR and I'm fully up to date with everything. So that then you need a real good 0-day for that to work. It is all these other metrics that matters in these simulations, but it gives you a good indication on how aware the employees are in identifying phishing emails. But as you said, we're also teaching them how to identify the emails coming from the phishing simulator. It requires that one other email just slips through and you still have a problem. So you still need to have all these other mechanisms in place to actually be secure.
Yeah, I completely agree, by the way.
And another opinion that I have, and then I'll let you just roam freely to see if you agree with me or not, is that we are often talking about passwords, and that's part of the phishing stuff. But what about just talking about identities? What if we come to a world where, like, we're halfway there already, where you when you try to log into a service, you get an email with a code. You're not even touching a password. There's no passwords involved. You're just like, I want to log in. This is my username. And then there's a code sent to your email address. And you have to enter that code into that system, and that will log you in. What will we do, like, when we go passwordless? What will we do when multi-factor authentication is default everywhere? Everywhere, like, really. Will phishing actually be a thing at that time?
Okay. A couple of things. Okay, so maybe one is regarding multi-factor authentication. I think if I was advising anyone to do anything like low effort but would create a lot of value, I would say a phishing resistant MFA should be one of the first things you implement in your company. Not just MFA, right? You want phishing resistant, you want something like a YubiKey, in my opinion, at least now. And I think in 10 years' time, will be laughing at the fact that we weren't doing it already. Or maybe it'll be obsolete. Second thing is, yes, I actually think that phishing will still be relevant in a few years, even with these identities, because it's so easy to trick somebody, even yourself, into thinking something that, business email compromise type stuff. I fake my way into your inbox and I ask you to perform an action. It doesn't have to be something like on the computer or requiring access to any system. It can be you have to submit an invoice or you have to pay the invoice, those kind of things. Yes, I think that'll be probably relevant, but it would be a much smaller or a more condensed type of stuff you have to protect for. I actually completely agree with you that phishing attempts or phishing exercises that you perform at companies, they're really measuring the wrong thing. So with the way that we do it today, we're usually also bypassing email filters. We're sending content and we're seeing how well the user or the person at the company is, how good they are at recognizing some patterns. And I heard at one conference, somebody was saying, airports have done a really good job of making suitcase, unattended luggage be really dangerous. Every 30 seconds on an airport, if you see luggage that's unattended, you should tell somebody. But then if you take that into phishing, then you're training people to recognize stuff that can just as easily be legitimate. You're possibly slowing things down, and there's no way for you to actually capture how well or how good they are at recognizing phishing emails. You're just slowing things down, and relying on it just doesn't make any sense at all. And some companies do is they do phishing or awareness training, and then they punish the people and have them do phishing training exercises.
But just measuring the process as well. Like, okay, so I've sent a fake invoice to you, and then what? It's almost like the assume breach mentality that we do when we do pen tests. Like, okay, if you send this fake invoice to finance, what will they do? Because you're just testing the filter, if you know what I mean. You're not testing the actual process. You're testing the filter. How can we filter out phishing emails? Yeah, we can educate the users to identify phishing emails. Yeah, but what if someone slips through? Test the process instead. What happens if something falls through? Because something will always fall through. Always.
Yeah, exactly. So like threat modeling, and this is probably something that should be done by security consultancies, is we just assume the breach. There's no point in us spending time in creating content that we know we're going to get through. Let's just think about what's the stuff that could happen and build around that.
We should focus so much more on assuming that something has happened, and see what's the consequences of that compromise. I think that's a more realistic scenario. Like, okay, if you do have access to the company's VPN, what can you do? If you do have access to this user's email address, what's inside the email box? What do they have? Do they have passwords in clear text? Do they have stored scanned photos of their password in their mailbox or whatever? There might be a million things. And we talked about awareness, and I have this opinion about awareness as well, that we're teaching people on things what they should not do, but we're not getting them excited about security. So for me, if you would ask me, like, what is awareness all about? Is it getting people motivated about doing the right thing, about caring about their identities, about caring that if something happens, that's a big problem. Because if we care, then we take that little extra, we do this extra mile to keep things safe. And the way we have been communicating about security and risks for a very long time is, according to me, completely wrong. I'll give you some examples. There's a lot of people who says, I have nothing to hide. And also, who wants to hack me? I'm not important. So if someone hacks me, I don't care because I have nothing to hide. By just having that mindset, you've lowered the bar and you're basically saying it's okay to hack me because I have nothing to hide. So I don't care. That's the wrong mentality. You want to have someone, all your employees should be like, it matters if I get hacked. If someone uses my identity to do bad stuff on the network, that matters because I have access to a lot of systems, a lot of information that someone else can have access to if they compromise my account. So I should care. Not because you're important, not because you have something to hide, but just because you're a valuable asset to the company. That's what you should care, because you're valuable, not because you have something to hide. Did that make
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I want to carry this on. I think also just for employees, just for people, individuals in society. So back in the day, Synthis occasionally got people walking in off the street and they had gotten hacked. And it's so weird because you don't, when they come in, they've lost their identity, they've lost the access to photos of their children, stuff like that. People are incredibly shell-shocked. I don't like the fear, uncertainty, and doubt type of tone of voice when you're talking about cybersecurity, but still, it's not about I have nothing to hide. It's also about what I have to lose. You have photos of your family. You have access to your like emails, and there are important things there that you absolutely do not want to lose, right?
thing that we should talk about is also the way we sell. So how do we sell this safety to people then? How do we sell safety? If we would sell physical things in the same way as we sell digital things, specifically when it comes to safety, if we would sell physical things in the same way as we sell security software, people would die. And this is actually a quite bold statement, but I want to discuss it with you anyway. So if you buy a car, right? No one is telling you like, oh, congratulations, Björn, but now you also need to buy an airbag, seatbelt, a brake, blinkers, a steering wheel, and all these sensors and all that stuff. You just assume that that's part of the car, right? Because you want to drive the car. But imagine a world where you're like, okay, I need to buy all these things. And you're like, okay, where do I buy these things? And they're like, well, you can buy these premium ones over here, or you can get the freemium here, the free stuff. I don't know how much experience you have in installing seat belts and airbag in cars. I have absolutely zero, none, zip, nothing. So what you do, you go on TikTok and YouTube and you spend the entire weekend learning how to do this by looking at do-it-yourself videos. And then Sunday evening, you're super happy, you install a seatbelt, airbag, and steering wheel in your car. You pop up a Corona, you're like, nice, I did it. Then 6 months later, I show up. I was like, Björn, come on, man. You have airbag 1.0. You need to have airbag 2.0 because the other one is not working. You need to patch that. That it just sounds so stupid when you replicate how we sell digital systems in the physical world. It just sounds stupid, but somehow we just accept that's how it is in the digital world, right? No?
So I actually agree, but I also think about, for example, seat belts. They used to be optional at some point. I guess regulation demanded that they should be put in. I'm just thinking, I wonder if there's a difference in like the quality of airbags depending on what model of a car you get. I have no idea. I'm just wondering. Maybe they actually need to be patched. But yeah, many car manufacturers are actually building in these optional subscription type services into their cars. Like, oh no, you don't have access to like the full turbo unless you pay $10 per month or something. That's kind of crazy. But I do wonder, like in terms of, okay, if we would legalize all of these things, look, you have to do A, B, and C to ensure that you're secure. You have to do this, and we're progressing a little bit towards it, very slowly, but we are with, for example, NIS, making some companies required to do at least the bare minimum. So maybe that's the thing.
Problem I'm having with this is who are forced to doing what? We
Yeah.
as users or owners of our company, we are forced to have a security that is this high according to NIS2 or DORA or ISO or whatever it is, right? But my concern is the vendors and the software and the cloud platforms, the cloud providers, they should be giving me the tools that I need. Because if there's a demand that I need to wear a seatbelt, the seatbelt needs to exist. It should not be something I buy extra. That is my concern with this industry. It's like we're providing computers and we're telling you like, oh, you need to have a seatbelt as well. So I need to go buy a seatbelt and then I'll buy the cheapest seatbelt possible because I just need a seatbelt. That's the requirement. I just need a seatbelt. And if that seatbelt is not designed for the car that I'm buying or for the thing that I'm using, like it has to make sense, right? So when we say, oh, full disk encryption is good, password manager is good, and all these things are good, multi-factor authentication is good. Yeah, but how? There's no standard for multi-factor authentication. Imagine that you buy a car and all these components could be developed by any company in the world. Like what if the company making Nutella could make airplanes? No, I don't want Kellogg's to make airplanes. I can create a firewall today and sell it tomorrow. If I'm able to sell my firewall and people buy it, that's congratulations. There's no controls if that firewall is actually working, if it's good or bad or whatever. We have controls by building planes or making cars or doing certain things, but there's no controls in building software. Not really.
Okay. Maybe a little bit philosophical, but at the same time, how do you evaluate how good these controls are? Take the seatbelt, for example. Actually, let's do ISO, because I had an amazing post on LinkedIn yesterday about our ISO journey. And my statement is essentially, okay, we are now ISO certified, but did that make us more secure? No, it didn't, not even slightly. How do you evaluate how good the standard is? Yes, ISO and all of these frameworks, they make you do things, but you still have the ability to kind of cheat. So for seatbelts, somebody just made it out of toilet paper. It's not going to actually save you. How do you evaluate that this is actually the stuff that you have to do and that it protects you in a sufficient way?
I have some comments. That is, compliant is not the same thing as being secure. I completely agree with that. Compliant just means that you fulfilled X amount of controls. That's what you've done, which is great because it still proves something, right? It proves that you are compliant against a certain framework. Doesn't mean that you have solved all the problems out there and that you're super secure. It means that you have a process, you have a structure, and you have a documented process of this structure. Still doesn't show you security. But when it comes to, for example, seatbelts in cars, I guess they're tested with crash dummies, and they will measure if this works. Before you can even buy these things, they have been tested. And I think that's what we're trying to achieve with, for example, penetration testing, code audits, and legislation and all these things. We don't have global legislation. We don't have global rules. Like we can talk about, for example, NIS2. Yeah. Does that affect the entire world? No, it doesn't. Not really. There's a lot of European legislations out there and a lot of American legislation. But I think we are aiming for a world where we can actually sell products, security products that has been controlled, that has been checked, that has been looked at. That's also sustainability, something that a lot of people talk about. But do we have sustainability in software? If you buy a smart TV, how long will that TV live, so to say? For how long will you get security updates? That's something that could be quite useful to know before buying something on Black Friday for Christmas. I just bought this smart thing and it's out of date already. End of life when you buy it.
Yeah, I guess. In terms of compliance, though, so you said you have proven that you are compliant to a framework, but you have not really proven that you're doing what you can. I kind of think that in order to do this the right way and not just bluff yourself through the audit, I think the initiative itself needs a lot of buy-in from the business itself, meaning like the C-suite. So I think if there's any place at a company where awareness in any shape or form is necessary, it's at that level, because they need to understand, like I said before, like their threat model. And I think about this quite a lot in terms of, just technical vulnerabilities. The exact same vulnerability can mean very, very different things based on, which company it's present at, right?
Mm-hmm.
A vulnerability in a file sharing platform or something. If you're a legal firm, you're dealing with, divorce papers and really personal information, while if you're just, I don't know, like a store, you're dealing with invoices. So it's not the same thing. And what's underneath means very different things. Do you have any take on this?
Yeah, and that is that our industry lack the the realistic scenarios that might happen in threats, not just vulnerabilities, but threats. Like we have to talk about the consequences of threats. Like, okay, if you report a problem, here's a software vulnerability. What's the consequence? What's the impact for me and my organization with this problem? As you said, it hits differently depending on who you are. But we're becoming much better at doing that. Instead of just saying, oh, Björn, you have a heap overflow in your MTA. Okay, what does that actually mean? Like, how does that affect me? Maybe that's not the language that we as an industry should use. Maybe we should not communicate security in that way. Maybe we should communicate in a different way. But we're becoming much better at that. I think for a very long time, the security industry and the IT industry has been very technical, but now it's becoming more human. I think that's what it has to be done. If you go to the doctor and the doctor will communicate with you in a human way, so you fully understand, like you need to take 2 aspirins and go home and go to bed. I don't need to talk about the Latin name of the bug that you have in your system or the different names of the bones in your body. That's, I think, the way we should communicate security, like in a more human, simple way.
It's about the ability to understand the pain points of your customer, whether it's the threat model or if it's just the requirements. It doesn't really matter. Like if you can't help them with a problem, but you actually understand the problem and their pain or their requirements, then you have the ability to point them towards a solution, and that builds business continuity for you as well. Even if it's incentivized by money down the line, I think that's okay. I guess if you don't care about the problem, you're not going to come up with a good solution anyway. Are you going to sell me a firewall when I need, I don't know, like an email client? Some people would.
What would we need to get companies not to get hacked, even with all those investments out there? What do we need? That is what I'm aiming for. If companies still get hacked, even with all these investments, why are the investments not working? So what's the gap? What are we missing?
I have theories, but I think it's just a really good question to just keep there. Like, it's a cliffhanger type thing. What are the things that we actually need to be secure? And then you can get what were they called? Digital security inspectors to check that out and try to answer that question for you as a company. Maybe if I could get you to tell maybe one story of something, some project, preferably like something like a war story, some thing you were trying to break into that was kind of difficult, but then there was like a eureka moment. Do you have anything like that?
So we were doing this penetration test and we were able to become domain admin. So we were domain admin, roaming freely on the network, getting access to all these kind of different things. But the client had quite strict network segmentation. So even with domain admin rights, you couldn't move to certain parts of the network. And there was one particular machine that was extremely well secured. That was like their holy grail. Let's call it like that. So we were thinking like, okay, how can we gain access to this machine? Because there's obviously people administrating this meeting, people logging into this meeting. So we can let's say if we can find the clients, the persons, the individuals that's allowed to work on this machine and hack their computers, and then from their computers jump over to whatever kind of other system and gain access to this holy grail part. And then we're like, okay, that's kind of difficult. Is there a different way? And we were able to compromise their virtualized environment. So we basically had access to their vCenters and their servers, running all these virtual machines. That was interesting. And we're like, okay, let's see what we can do from these systems. And I saw that holy grail that was part of that target list to access. Like, okay, it's here. It's running in this vCenter stuff. And the thing is, you can't really download an image from vCenter if the image is already running. So if it's running, you can't do it really. But what they've done is they've actually upgraded the server from one version to another version, and the old version was still there, but it was turned off. So we could download that version from the vCenter. So I downloaded that, and that image didn't have disk encryption. So I could just mount that image on my own computer, gaining access to the file system. So what I did is I downloaded the shadow file, the file containing the local users on that computer, and the password hash, the encrypted password hash for those users. And I ran that through our password cracker and was able to crack one of the passwords. I was like, okay, now I have a local password to this machine, but I cannot log into it with SSH or anything remotely because I don't have any network access to this machine. And it just took a while before I was like, wait a second here. In the vCenter, you can open up a console to the machine that you want to access. So just open up the console window and logging in locally to the machine, bypassing every single firewall rule, anything that they ever thought about, MFA, blah, blah, blah. Because I was logging in physically, not physically, but locally on the machine, getting access to the account with that cracked password. That was kind of my eureka moment. It was like, yes, but it took a while to think about all these things. It's easy to explain it now afterwards, but that was like really nice. Bypassing the network segmentation and MFA and SSH keys and all that jump hosts and everything that they had in place, but just opening up the console and logging in locally on the machine.
That's really cool. But is it typically are you typically successful in cracking passwords in general?
It's becoming more and more difficult because people are figuring out that unique passwords and also very long passwords that takes time to crack. So it's becoming more and more difficult. But the good thing is that sometimes you just need one account, Maybe someone made a little bit mistake. So that's kind of what you're hoping for. And also, obviously, the MFA part and all that stuff.
No. I think, at least back in the day when we were doing some password cracking, it was either really short passwords, but also quite a lot of times we're using dictionary attacks on these passwords. So they're really predictable combination of words with something like a number. And I want to say this because, sometimes during sales, it's fun to point out and say, what are our passwords? It's like the names of our children with a dot in between and like a number at the end. It's the name of the street we grew up at, something like that. That is so common. When you have password policies that require you to change like every month or something, a very typical user, a typical UX in that is that people will just reuse the password, but they will, change a dot for a comma or an exclamation mark and then update the numbers. So they're not actually like making the password much stronger. And in that regard, it's kind of easy to do like rainbow or dictionary attacks on it, even if they're long.
100%. And I also like, the people, when you talk about structures of passwords, it's like people always have the capital letter as the first letter in the password. That's where you have the capital letter. Then you base it on a word, a name, or something, right? And then afterwards, you need to have the numbers, which is always 2 or 4 digits. If you have a different set of figures, like not 2 or 4, let's say you have a 5 or 6, it's always in a sequence, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And at the end, you have this stupid exclamation mark. Always the exclamation mark at the end. I don't know why, but that's a typical thing. At least here in Sweden, it's like most passwords look like that.
Dots and exclamation marks.
What we're also noticing is like a lot of people talk about password complexity, but then they store passwords in browsers, for example. And that's when we do these internal pen tests. Like as soon as we are local admin on a machine, we'll dump every credential possible. So it doesn't matter if you have a really strong password. If it's stored, for example, in the browser or a program like that, then we can dump it. So an advice is also to use a password manager because that's much more difficult to crack than your web browser.
Definitely. I just wanted to conclude this with saying it was a pleasure having this conversation, and thank you so much for joining this. Yeah, and again, just thank you. We'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Any final words? Final remark?
Final remark is just thank you for doing this, because we cannot solve everything with technology. We have to have these conversations to talk about things, share experiences, share thoughts, because we don't have the perfect solutions for everything, right? But we have to discuss it to become better. And so thank you for doing this. I think it helps.